The Philly roast pork sandwich. It's easily my favorite sandwich out of Philadelphia. And no, I'm not forgetting about that other Philly based sandwich. As we're constantly bombarded with opinions from people listing their favorite cheesesteak spots or instructing people on how they should be ordering a cheesesteak, as if Philadelphians actually care how you enunciate words like with or without. The Philly roast pork has built a following just from places like John's Roast Pork or DeNick's making awesome sandwiches. Today, I'm going to make my own Philly roast pork sandwich, and to pair with it, I'm going to use one of the quintessential Philly beers, Yard's Pale Ale, on this episode of Bacon and Brew. We'll start with a 5-pound pork shoulder. It's important to note that this is not a facsimile of a cheesesteak. In fact, many ways it's the complete opposite. Instead of being cooked quickly on a flat top, we're going to braise this over the course of hours, which means it's a great chance to introduce lots of extra flavors. Flavors such as 2 tablespoons of fennel seed that I'm grinding up fine in my spice grinder. I'll then peel and chop 5 cloves of garlic. This is Italian inspired after all. I'll also add 2 large sprigs of rosemary, as well as 3 or 4 sprigs of fresh thyme, both finely chopped. I'll mix that together with 1 teaspoon of black pepper and 2 tablespoons of kosher salt. I'll sprinkle the entire thing over my pork roast, add a little drizzle of oil, and just rub it all in. Then I'll roll this back up and tie it up with butcher's twine. I'm not expert, so this isn't the most graceful process, but I got there eventually, keeping it in a nice tight package that'll hold its shape while cooking. I'm also gonna slice up 1 large onion. I'll just take off the ends, remove the skin, and cut it into thin strips. Then in my Dutch oven with a little bit of oil, I'll add my onions and a pinch of kosher salt. I'll sweat these until they're translucent in color. I'll then add my pork shoulder along with 2 cups of chicken stock, which technically makes this a braise, not a roast at all. After putting on the lid, I'll place this into a 250-degree oven where it'll cook for 4 to 5 hours until the meat is tender, but not quite falling apart. Let's talk about internal temperature for a moment, because when I looked up recipes for roast pork online, I've seen recipes that range anywhere from 160 degrees Fahrenheit to over 200 degrees Fahrenheit. That's a pretty big range to consider. So let's think about what our goal is here. The reason why we're braising at a low temperature is because we want the connective tissue to break down into gelatin to give us more tender meat. That process starts to happen around 160 degrees. But the key word here is starts. So if we take it out as soon as it hits 160 degrees, then we're still going to have very tough meat. Whereas the opposite side of the spectrum, if we're cooking it over 200 degrees, then all of it's going to break down and we're going to end up with pulled pork, which there's some great recipes out there for pulled pork sandwiches, but that's not what we're making today. We want to be able to slice it really thin. So I'm trying to go for the Goldilocks zone here, and I'm going to shoot for 175 degrees. Once we reach our target temperature, I'll place the pork and the cooking liquid in separate containers so we could refrigerate them both overnight. After it chills, it should be easier to slice, and besides, we have to make the most important part of any sandwich, the bread. I'll use 260 milliliters of water along with 4 grams of yeast and 400 grams of bread flour. I'll also add 2 teaspoons of diastatic malt powder, which should help it rise and assist with browning, along with 1 tablespoon of olive oil and a teaspoon of salt. I'll move this to my mixer, which I'll knead with the dough hook until it becomes smooth and elastic, about 10 to 15 minutes. After that time, I still feel like the dough's a little too sticky, so I'm going to take it out of the bowl and knead it by hand for a little. As you can see, it easily sticks to the counter in my hand, but after folding it over a few times and rolling into a ball, that outside really tightens up and I'm able to handle it easier. I'm going to spray a bowl with a little bit of oil, place my dough inside, and cover it up with plastic wrap. After about 10 to 15 minutes after the gluten relaxes, I'm going to do a quick fold to further strengthen the gluten before placing it back in, covering up again, and allowing it to rise for a couple hours or until doubled in size. After the dough is risen, I'm going to weigh it really quick just to get the total mass. That way I could divide it into 3 portions of equal size. And it looks like our target is 226 gram rolls, which are huge, but this is Philly and we make big sandwiches. Now I'm going to do what's called pre-shaping. I'm just going to fold each dough ball in on itself and roll it into a tight ball. This way we could allow the gluten to rest before shaping into our final form. I'll just cover our dough with a damp towel for about 10 to 15 minutes. Now working with each piece individually, I'll just flatten it out. If it's a little sticky, you can dust a little flour onto it. But don't overdo it. We're still going to need our counter to be a little tacky to create the proper tension along the outside of our rolls. If the dough is snapping back like this one is, you just need to let it rest longer. And now it's rolling out nicely. If you're wondering why I'm rolling this when rolls are supposed to be cylindrical shaped, I'm trying to create as much tension on the outside as possible and really strengthen that gluten. We're going to be filling these with lots of pork dripping in its own juice, so we're going to need that bread to be strong to stay intact. I'll roll the flat piece of dough up like a cigar and then take the ends and just kind of pinch those over to make one solid cylinder. I'll pinch the seam to make sure I seal that up really good, and then I'll just roll it out to form a long torpedo shape. Now the seam will end up being on the bottom, so what I'm going to do with the top is just roll it in sesame seeds. If the sesame seeds aren't sticking, spraying with a little water should help. And once the surface is wet, those sesame seeds should have no problem adhering. I'll move that to a baking sheet lined with parchment paper and dusted with cornmeal, and I'll move on to my other 2 rolls. I'll repeat that same process for my other 2 rolls. Of course, the sesame seeds are optional, but they really do add a nice touch to the sandwich. I'll give each one a nice stretch before laying it down because we want these to be fairly long. Now we just need to let our rolls proof for another half an hour. You could cover them with a damp towel, but I like to use these large proofing bags because they give the dough plenty of room to rise. Before we bake, I'm using a razor at an angle to score the tops of each of the rolls. This will provide the bread a spot to expand as it bakes. I'm placing these into a 450-degree oven, but it's not quite that simple. In order to get a thin, crisp crust, we're going to need some steam. So I placed a baking tray in the bottom of the oven as it was preheating. I'll fill that with boiling water, and I'll also spray the rolls with water before closing the oven door. And now we'll bake for 20 minutes until the crust has a beautiful golden brown color. And really, these rolls could be good for a lot more than just roast pork sandwiches. To make sure they're done, you could just give them a quick tap on the bottom and you should hear a hollow sound. Now that our pork shoulder has rested overnight, it's time to slice. Now, like most people, I don't have one of those large deli slicers, so I'm going to try to cut it as thin as I could get it. This is the real importance of it being as cold as possible. After slicing thin, I'll move my pork to that cooking liquid from earlier. I just had to remove the fat from the surface, and I had it warming gently on my stovetop. And now I'll move on to another component that makes the Philly roast pork sandwich unique, and that's some garlicky greens like broccoli rabe. I'm going to chop up another 3 cloves of garlic, along with a few Calabrian peppers, which aren't typically in a Philly roast pork sandwich, but I had them around and I think they'll make a really nice addition. I'll add those to a saute pan with a little bit of oil and let it gently heat up while I get my broccoli rabe. I'm just going to mostly remove the stems and roughly chop the broccoli rabe. I think the addition of bitter greens really adds a nice complement to the richness of the pork. I just want to give these a quick rinse. You don't even really have to dry them. You could just dump them in and let the steam from the excess water wilt the greens. And this really doesn't take long at all to cook, so we're just about ready to prepare our sandwich. I'll cut the roll down one side, being careful to leave a hinge intact. I'll spread this apart, and now I'm going to do something that I've seen before, is just gut the bread, just removing a little bit of that interior. This is all about proportions. We want to leave room for more meat, and my rolls are particularly thick. I'll line the inside with provolone. Sharp provolone is preferred. In addition to flavor, it'll also help protect the bread from the dripping pork. I'll fill the roll with probably more pork than would be considered healthy, and then top it off with some of that garlicky broccoli rabe. And there you have it, the Philly roast pork sandwich. Savory pork shoulder with provolone, garlicky broccoli rabe, and the perfect roll to support it all. But nothing can make it more Philly than pairing it with a local beer, like Yard's Philly Pale Ale. Yard's Philadelphia Pale Ale is one of the essential Philly beers. Yard's itself has been a staple in Philadelphia bars for the last 30 years, since they opened a tiny brewery in Manayunk in 1996, and eventually grew into their current facility on Spring Garden Street. I think Philadelphia Pale Ale was a great choice to pair with the roast pork sandwich, not just because of the symbolism of an iconic Philly beer with an iconic Philly sandwich. Those Italian herbs and spices on a roast pork and the garlic really need that hops to match that flavor. But also that crusty bread really connects with the light malty flavor of the beer. All right, my final thoughts on a roast pork is I always used to imagine that this is something that you just don't replicate at home, that you have to go to the Nick's to get the real thing. And I feel like I proved that wrong. I think the reason why you don't see these kind of sandwiches outside of Philadelphia, at least not done well, is because of the bread. They never get that part right. And for me, I think that the bread was my favorite part here today. It had a great crust, chewy mouthfeel, and that hinge was able to stay intact even after filling it with pork dripping in its own juices. And those sesame seeds, when you bake the bread at that high temperature and those seeds get nice and toasted, it adds a great flavor to the sandwich. The one thing I think I would change is the cooking temperature on that braised pork. I cooked it at 250 degrees, which is a very low temperature, because I was focused on getting the most tender meat possible. And I think I actually kind of achieved that. But what I was missing is a really good browning. So I think next time I might start out initially uncovered at a higher temperature to get that browning, and then cover it and reduce the temperature to 250 degrees to let it cook low and slow and really break down that connective tissue. And that might be me just getting greedy with flavor, because believe me, this is packed with flavor. That garlic, the fennel, those herbs. That's the thing I love about the Philly roast pork sandwich. Whereas the cheesesteak focuses on the meat, the cheese, and the bread, the Philly roast pork just comes at you with every direction from flavor. Thank you for watching. I encourage you to try this at home, but if you're not up for it, make sure you stop by places like the Nick's or John's Roast Pork if you ever find yourself in Philadelphia. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and join me next time when I take another one of my favorite beers and try to bake the perfect pairing. Go Birds!